And I just wanted to share that if you have any questions that you would like to ask to our speakers, you can do so by clicking in Zoom on the Q&A button and submitting questions there. Also, if you have any technical problems, feel free to reach out to Mara, Mara, M-A-R-A, at jcfsandiego.org. At this point, I would love to turn it over to Beth Sirull, the CEO of the Jewish Community Foundation. And Beth, don't forget to unmute yourself.
As we have been joking, unmute yourself is the new phrase. Hi, everybody. I assume you can see my screen. Yes, Ollie? All is good?
Yeah, you hit slideshow share.
Oh, yep. There we go. Cool. Okay, so many of you have heard me speak before, but I have never used this manner of public speaking, so we're getting used to it. As Ollie said, I'm Beth Sirull. I'm the CEO and president of the Jewish Community Foundation here in San Diego. I am joined speaking this afternoon by Charlene Seidle of the Leash Tag Foundation and Darren Schwartz of the Jewish Federation of San Diego County. Early on, we all understood that COVID-19, that a pandemic was going to have enormous community-wide negative impacts on the Jewish community and on the community as a whole. And a challenge of this magnitude required and called for a big collaboration and a unified response across the major funders of the Jewish community in San Diego. So we were really proud and honored, and I know my colleagues were as well, to establish the San Diego Jewish Community COVID-19 Emergency Fund, the Jewish Community Foundation, the Jewish Federation, and Leash Tag. And so we want to update you a bit about the fund today and also about the needs that we are seeing. So to date, we have raised nearly $2 million. It's 120 donations have been made so far, and they range from $18 all the way up. And we are enormously grateful for people's participation and their generosity. We know that everybody is feeling the effects of the volatile economy and the volatile market, and we greatly appreciate people's generosity. At the same time, unfortunately, the needs are enormous and growing. And Darren will take you a few minutes into really some stories from the ground in the Jewish community in San Diego, but I'm sure you all read the newspaper, so you know that 10 million jobless unemployment claims were initiated in the last 2 weeks. That is more than in the entire 18 months of the 2008 recession or Great Recession. It's more actually than at any time in the history of unemployment. You may not be as aware that 78% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, and 45% have basically no savings at all. So the pandemic has the makings of a real humanitarian nightmare. And San Diego is going to feel its share of pain. The economists estimate that 350,000 people in San Diego will lose their jobs before this is over. And we're already seeing long lines at the food banks, increased calls. We see many of our organizations either not making or really struggling to make payroll, which just puts more of our community unemployed. And so the needs continue, even though we are off to a solid start. We established, as we wrote, and many of you have seen, we established a task force for governing this fund. And that, as you can see down the left side of your screen, are the lay leaders, and the right side, the professional leaders, Brian Tauber and Michael Jesser from Federation. Many of you know that Michael is recovering well, but still recovering in the hospital from surgery. And Darren is very ably standing in for him. Leo Spiegel and me, and then from the foundation, and Emily and Charlene Seidle from the Leash Tag Foundation. And at this point, Charlene Seidle has stepped up very wonderfully and has sort of served as the master of ceremonies of the chief of staff of the task force. And so she is going to share the task force approach and our process and some of our early results. Go ahead, Charlene, it's all yours. Unmute yourself.
I've been joking, thanks Beth, I've been joking that unmute yourself is gonna be one of the slogans that comes out of this experience. Well, I was just saying that it's really good to be with everybody. Even though I can't see you, it's really good to feel the community that's around us, around the vast need that Beth so ably described. And I wanna, before I start telling you a little bit more about what the process has been like to date, some of our decisions just in the last couple of weeks since establishing this fund, I just want to reiterate how honored we are for the partnership as well. This is clearly an area that philanthropy cannot address on its own at all, and certainly can't barely even make like a drop in the bucket of need. But it is an area where philanthropy can be more nimble, perhaps, more locally focused, more urgent in addressing some immediate and take more risk in addressing some immediate needs, and then really create access and help organizations and individuals to access many, many other resources that will be available to them. And I just also want to note the nature of this partnership in that you have a private foundation coming together with a community foundation coming together with a federated organization. It's really a strong philanthropic consortium backed by each of you, by donors to the fund, and by the community that is really working hard to make good decisions. I'll also just add that the community is continuing the precedent that was established in other disasters, while clearly not of the scope of this as it's come to turn out, but the two wildfires that we had in 2003 and 2007 in San Diego, and also in 2008, 2009, the recession. There were funds established at the Jewish Community Foundation with multiple partners and with a consortium of leaders that really navigated different needs. So if you'll forgive the metaphor, what we're trying to do is sort of plan for a sprint and a marathon at the same time without understanding the distance, the speed, and very little concept of the route. So all we can do is balance, and again, forgive them the metaphor, but our muscle memory, but be closely attuned to the markers on the field. So translating that to the fund, the task force is meeting very frequently and course correcting almost daily as we're looking at needs, opportunities, and keeping in close touch with organizational leadership, practitioners in the field, case managers in particular at several organizations who are the link to the vulnerable clients that Beth spoke about, rabbis, people who are trusted by those whose lives have been devastated in many, many ways. Ollie, so today I'm going to talk more about the short-term strategy, because we are stopping the bleed and also looking at the overall patient, again, to forgive that metaphor. But when I say short-term, I mean these are some initial priorities that we've set for the first 30 to 45 days, the next 30 to 45 days, while we're looking at longer-term needs and doing some needs assessment. So the first is how to meet the most basic needs for individuals and families, particularly the most vulnerable, who always have been hardest hit in this, who are most closely impacted. Primarily, and I'll describe this more in a minute, but primarily we're focusing on food and medicine and other basic needs, and a little bit less on housing, given the government and state and local decisions to stay evictions for a while and foreclosures. Again, we're looking at the most urgent needs that can't be immediately met, while really trying to leverage all other forms of assistance. And then the second category that we're providing is bridge loans that will enable some of our Jewish organizations to not have to make crisis decisions about staff in this time of just total unknown, which means this first month or so of sudden abrupt change. Keeping people on the payroll and employed also means that they have a little bit more time to care for themselves, to be self-sufficient, to not worry about basic needs immediately, and to face immediate layoffs that could have happened without these bridge loans. One other thing that I'll say about the loans before we talk a little bit more about the basic needs is that we made the decision to provide these bridge loans before the government announced their payroll protection program, which actually is stepping in, and in certain cases, there's $350 billion available, as you may have seen, for small business and for nonprofits. And as we've been told, the $350 billion is already going really fast, but federal payroll protection in the form of loans from the federal government that may be converted to grants that will hopefully, and this is hopefully a good strategy, to bridge funding from the government coming in and to provide this short-term crisis management, as well as an abundance of technical assistance opportunities to really help organizations connect with the intermediaries that are going to be providing the loans. So first, this area of individuals and families' basic needs, which we can talk about on the next slide. Our task force, so we could go to the next slide. Oh, and actually the one after that. Our task force decided that we wanted to pre-qualify organizations. Well, we're pre-qualifying organizations in order to immediately enable case managers, as I said, who are on the front lines with clients, to get the funds out to those clients in need. We've initially pre-qualified Jewish Family Service, which is working with hundreds of vulnerable seniors, families, people who are on the edge, as well as our San Diego Gemach, which was already working, both have already been working, they're already trusted partners to vulnerable people who may have felt ashamed to seek assistance in other places, but they already had relationships of trust. We may expand this list. We're working closely with them to understand, we've given them the ability to immediately award small gifts for 2 individuals who are most vulnerable for food and medicine and basic needs, as I said. And then as we understand more about who they're providing assistance to, we're gonna learn, the task force is learning, we'll report back to the community, and then we'll be able to also replenish, course correct, and refocus. But first, this is an important learning experience as well as a giving experience to immediately help somebody make the decision about how am I going to put food on my family's table, and really defer to the case managers who are at the forefront of that need and the trusted organizations. On the loan side, covered in the next slide, we're in the process, we opened an application process about a week or so ago to all of our Jewish organizations, synagogues, schools, to apply for payroll protection loans. There was a question submitted ahead of time about what they're asked to submit. We tried to really streamline the application, which is one of the value adds of the fund, where we can ask for streamlined data, and organizations that are already stretched only have to fill out one application and don't have to go to all of our organizations. They submit proof of payroll, give the task force some indication of what kinds of fixed expenses other than payroll they have, and payroll means total compensation because medical coverage is so important in this time. Give the task force some indication of other expenses, and then proof of their payroll. We also ask for projected revenues, but so far, and we've awarded loans so far just through one meeting that we've had to these 5 organizations, and we know already, we're meeting again Wednesday, we know already that there are 4 or 5 organizations, schools, and synagogues with applications in the queue. But in most of these cases, we were in a number of phone calls as well, contemporaneous. That's how quickly we're gathering data, because that's how quickly they're learning about their revenue projections and needs. One of the key conditions of this loan. And I think one of the key value adds that we're providing is technical assistance, as I mentioned before, to get them into the queue for the government programs. The $350 billion is first come, first serve, reliant in part on relationships with local banks that will be the intermediaries for these loans. And we've partnered with the Jewish Federations of North America that I just want to acknowledge has done a magnificent job in quickly mobilizing. They set up a website that I'd really encourage each of you, if you'd like to look at it. It's jewishtogether.org. And if there's going to be a follow-up to this, maybe the GCF team can include that website in your follow-up, because it's a resource of how to apply for these competitive government loans. They've already hosted a number of webinars. All the organizations that are in our list have participated, been notified in multiple webinars, and they've really provided good service. And then we've done a lot of one-on-one technical assistance as well, and stayed very, very closely connected. Organizations, including these and others that will come in the next couple weeks, are required to sign a note. It's an interest-free loan, a note. They're required to make best efforts and to apply for the government program, and repayment is articulated in the note. And I can say more about that in the questions if anybody's interested. And then in the next slide, just thinking about some of our follow-up. So I mentioned in this short term, these are the activities that we're doing. We're reviewing additional applications. We're working with these organizations. So that's the first, 30 days. There's going to be many, many more needs that emerge. I mean, healthcare for those who are employed, laid off, food needs, isolation, trauma. Our staff team is conducting some midterm needs assessment, and going to be constantly feeding the task force as we also learn through what's been done and our conversations with the organizations. And I'll just close by articulating a few of the value adds that I think have been apparent in this partnership that we've heard from the organizations, and so that you all can feel good about being part of a philanthropic community that has supported this. Number one, quick money that was able to be provided for payrolls, some of which went through Friday, with immediate turnaround, a team that's really staying closely connected to the needs almost on a daily basis, a streamlined process for really stretched organizations, and huge technical assistance by a team that really is expert in providing this assistance to organizations and to individuals who are so vulnerable right now at this time of great need and great uncertainty. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to address questions. And now I'm really delighted to turn it over to Darren Schwartz, our able partner, the Chief Planning and Strategy Officer at the Jewish Federation, who's going to share some stories to really put a face on some of the needs that we've discussed.
Thank you, Charlene. And I just want to say how privileged we feel to work with you and your team at LeachTag, as well as Beth, you and your team at the Jewish Community Foundation. We're really doing some amazing things as a Jewish community. I think something everybody on this call can be proud about. Hopefully what you heard from Charlene and what you heard from Beth is that we are taking a multifaceted approach at understanding the needs of the community. We're talking to organizations, we're learning nationally. And what I've been asked to speak on this call about is what we're learning really on the ground. And I just want to, have a shout out again to Jewish Family Service and Gemach, but also the synagogues and agencies that are really dealing with their constituents and hearing about really heart-wrenching stories of families that are losing jobs, losing income, trying to figure out how to make ends meet. It's really a difficult time for everyone. I wanted to speak a little bit about what we've been seeing through our senior phone bank. For those of you that are unaware, the Federation launched a phone bank about 3 weeks ago, where we started focusing on seniors 80 years old and older, and we've since expanded to 70. To date, we're engaging close to 100 volunteers, and we've called over 1,400 seniors. And really, we want to hear what their emergency needs are. We want to hear what some of their concerns are in isolation. We want to just connect with them as a community. And also we want to take everything that we're learning and really share that with this collaboration of the three organizations so that we can anticipate the need in the future. So I would say perhaps the largest learning that we've gotten so far, and this might sound obvious, is that this pandemic is the great equalizer. There are many, many stories, like I said, of individuals, of families, of parents, of kids that are really struggling. But what we're learning through this phone bank is that this is impacting everybody. So here are the three stories that I would like to share. One of the first couples that we supported was an elderly couple that was going to be unable to find food in the coming 2 days. We partnered and we worked with JFS to make sure that they got food delivery by the end of the day. But what was really interesting was our marketing director got an email from a marketing director in a Jewish community on the East Coast saying, I don't know if you know this, but you guys reached out to my parents, and I had no idea that they did not have access to food. They typically go out, they get food on their own, and since they've been asked to stay in, they haven't been able to get food. They didn't tell me or my siblings. And it is so nice to know that the Jewish community looks out for the Jewish community no matter where they live. We heard from an elderly couple that was living in Rancho Santa Fe, a couple that are donors to our Jewish organizations. And their primary caregiver, an adult child of theirs, was actually sick and was in self-quarantine. And again, in a similar situation, this is a couple that had access to funds, but with the loss of their child who was ill, and with organizations and companies like Instacart, you having to book 3 or 4 or 5 days in advance to get food, they were really in a bind. Again, we as a community were able to arrange to get them food in their home. And then something else that we're learning, and this is an example of how we're trying to anticipate needs moving forward in the future. Recently, I personally spoke with a Holocaust survivor. This survivor is pretty self-sufficient. She's in her home, sheltering in place. Her children, adult children, don't live here. And she is now the primary caregiver for her 96-year-old husband, of which there used to be a caregiver to come in and support her husband and her needs. She is getting by, but now she's having a hard time, caring for her husband at the same time. And I know that we're experiencing similar challenges, even with families that have children with special needs. And so as this dynamic situation continues, we are going to try to stay ahead of this and support the community in the different ways in which these challenges are emerging. Thank you.
Hi again, it's Beth. Thank you, Charlene, and thank you, Darren, and thank you everyone for your support. It has really been tremendous. I want to take a second and acknowledge the team at JCF. As Charlene mentioned earlier, we did process some loans this week, literally in an hour. I mean, from the time they were approved, they were out the door in order to make payroll on Friday to keep our community employed. And so I appreciate working remotely how much the JCF team and all our teams have been able to collaborate together. It's really been remarkable. But we couldn't do any of it without the money that we have raised from all of you, and we are enormously grateful for your support. And I wish I could say, okay, now we're going to hang up because we're done. But I can't stop now because, as we've been saying the whole time, the needs are really great. And we know that what's going to be required will far outstrip what we have raised to date. And we want to be able to ensure that every individual in our community has a roof over their head, food on the table, the necessary medicine they need, that their children are cared for and have access to what education there is at the moment. Because many of our lower income families aren't set up for remote education, and we don't want our kids to fall behind. We want to be able to meet all these individual and family needs. We also want to preserve the infrastructure and the foundation of the Jewish community, so that when we emerge from COVID-19 to some new normal, we will have the infrastructure, the foundation of our Jewish community that we can rebuild and reshape as necessary, but that it will be here. So we don't want to see. I mean, there's been some statistics that there will be more bankruptcies than deaths from this, and who knows? But we don't want to see our organizations completely shut down at this time, and then much easier to build from a base than to have to start completely over. And so, as I said, I wish I could stop now, but really it is time. We really need everybody to go to jcfsandiego.org and donate. And we welcome gifts of all sizes and shapes, but we really encourage everybody to do their part. We anticipate that we will have these calls frequently, but not too frequently, appropriately as the situation unfolds. As Charlene said, it's all dynamic, and we are adapting really daily, sometimes hourly. But with that, you can type in any questions, and we are happy to answer any questions that you have before we let you go. And we really appreciate your time this afternoon as well. And we're all in this together, and we're going to get through it.
Hi, everybody. I'm Charlene Wollach. I'm the Vice President of Operations at the Jewish Community Foundation. I've been elected to field your questions and answers. At the bottom of your Zoom screen, you will see there's an opportunity for you to click a little button that says Q&A. Feel free to do that. In the meantime, I do have some questions that have been submitted. First of all, a comment. The audience want me to share with you their appreciation as a community for this collaboration, which is a role model to the rest of the community. And they wanted to share their appreciation. And then as a follow-up question, perhaps Charlene, you might answer, how do we ensure that all Jewish organizations are aware of this amazing opportunity in the city?
Really great question. We've tried through a lot of different channels to make them aware. There have been multiple emails that have gone out to different lists, calls that have been made. But I would say if you know of an organization that's not aware, make them aware. That's a great thing to do to expand our networks.
Great.
So thank you.
This call is as much an effort to inform me. I mean, we want to inform you of all that we're doing, but we need all of you to be ambassadors for this work as well.
The next question, Beth, might be a good one for you. The question is the money raised staying in San Diego County, and are you sharing any of this money with non-Jewish organizations?
The San Diego Jewish Community COVID-19 Emergency Fund, a rather long name, is specifically for the Jewish community in San Diego County. The Jewish Community Foundation has another fund, a vulnerable populations fund, that is addressing needs in the secular community. We are fond of saying that as a Jewish community, we have an obligation to our fellow Jews, but a responsibility for the entire community. And we as a foundation are balancing that, and we encourage you to do what you can on both fronts.
Great, thank you. And then the second, this part I could just answer. The question was, will this session be recorded and these slides be available? And I'll just mention that the session is being recorded and it will be shared with all of you, and it will be available on the JCF website probably by tomorrow. The last question that is here so far, but I'm watching them. Beth, perhaps once again, you might be able to talk about this, and then Charlene, perhaps as a follow-up. And can you tell us more about if and when the loans might be forgiven?
So the thinking is that the Payroll Protection Act that the federal government is rolling out, it will take even, I mean, we've ensured that the organizations that we have approved loans to either have applied or are applying right now, and most of them have submitted applications already. The idea is that these interest-free loans will bridge these organizations till the SBA dollars come in, at which point they'll repay the emergency fund, and then we'll be able to either reloan or grant those dollars. We all understand, though, that not every organization is going to get SBA dollars, and so we've made these loans for 6 months. They are extendable, and they can and an organization can apply to have them forgiven, and we will take those. You know, we're looking at every organization's circumstances uniquely. As Charlene said, we're on the phone. You know, we're looking at their budget actuals. Really, you know, we're underwriting, whether for grants or loans, we are really underwriting these situations to understand what's going on the ground, and we're making a point of ensuring that what we pay for is ultimately what the government will not cover, because we want philanthropy is precious, and we want it to be used for things that other sources will not cover.
Thank you. This question is for Darren. I think you'd be the best one, Darren. You can unmute yourself. Some synagogues and agencies and organizations are calling their members to evaluate and connect. How do we prevent duplication?
I think that that's a really wonderful question. So when we started with the phone bank, that was one of the first questions that came up. And in fact, in our script, you know, we ask our volunteers to acknowledge we're a part of a Jewish community. You may be part of a synagogue or a JCC, and you'll most likely be getting calls from other people. We actually don't see it as a bad thing for especially all of our seniors to be getting calls at home. Everybody has the ability to see who's calling now. And frankly, we haven't heard any concerns yet. Like I said, we've talked about 1,400 seniors, and we haven't heard one kind of complaint that I know of that they're getting too many calls from different organizations.
Just to jump in, I don't know if the question related to fundraising calls, but I'll just answer that because it's a similar answer along the same lines as Darren. You know, other organizations are fundraising. This is going to take a community to hold up the needs that are emerging here, and we look at it as sort of a collective effort. Every dollar that's addressed to this need is a dollar that is going to be importantly spent.
Right. Thank you so much.
Add to that, Charlene, just to be clear, one of the benefits of the 3 organizations collaborating is we are ensuring that we're only calling people once for this fund.
Charlene, this question might be best suited for you. How are you planning to identify and meet the needs of the poorest Jews in San Diego County?
Well, initially, we're doing that through the individual grants that I mentioned, through the 2 organizations primarily that are currently working with trusted relationships with the poorest Jews in the Jewish community, the Gemach and Jewish Family Service. We're also exploring opportunities around potentially rabbis' discretionary funds. Any way that we can reach the poorest Jews, we're gonna explore opportunities to help them. And echoing what Beth said, philanthropy should be the first and the last dollars in a way, like do everything that is needed like today, but then like do everything that government won't do, only supplement government.
Thank you.
So again, if you have ideas about how to identify them, we welcome you to share them.
Thank you. The next question, again, this might be for Beth or Charlene. How quickly are loan applications approved once application is submitted?
Within a few days. I mean, it depends on the situation, but we're in daily contact with the organizations. Go ahead, Ben.
No, I was going to say, and the task force so far has been meeting twice a week. And some of it does depend on the urgency. Like I said earlier last week, you know, we had some organizations that really needed to make their payroll on Friday, and we really wanted to ensure that that our Jewish community got paid and could, you know, meet their needs, particularly right before Pesach. And so we really, you know, when they come in, we're on them right away. We're following up with calls because there's always questions, and staff, I guess, to just be a little bit more specific on process. the staff at the 3 organizations is looking at the applications and preparing what be sort of a credit memo, as it were, but a recommendation to the task force, and then the whole task force is meeting to review. There have been in a couple cases there were definite follow-up questions, so we went back and then got more information and then came back to the task force a day or 2 later. So it's it is in real time.
Thank you. Darren? Excuse me, are donors being encouraged to give to this emergency fund in addition to their regular giving that they do annually?
That's a great question. And I just reiterate that, all philanthropic dollars are good right now. Yes, from a federation standpoint, clearly most of the people on the call are familiar with the fact that we have an annual campaign. Listen, we're doing a lot of work internal within Federation. We're doing a lot of great work in partnership with these 2 great organizations. We would encourage those that are able to give, clearly to support this fund, but also, we're, as an organization, we're a fundraising organization too.
Thank you. And then the last question, which I think you addressed, but perhaps a repetition would be helpful, is can the organizations get help with their application if they get stuck or if they need more help?
Can I address that? Because I also saw another question I want to be sure to address to clear up. So yes, absolutely. Technical assistance, that's the hallmark of one of our value adds. We're providing either our staff or through the national resources a lot of help to organizations. So happy to say more about that. The other question that I just saw was, I think maybe a little misunderstanding. It's not 2 individuals that have received the individual assistance grant. It's 2 organizations that have been pre-qualified to receive sums of money so that they can quickly give to multiple individuals in need. So we expect there to be, scores of individuals assisted through these grants, and we'll know more on our next update because we're going to start to get information about those individuals fed back to us.
Thank you. And as a follow-up to that, are you in the position where you can share how much has been distributed to the Gemach and to JFS for those individual grants or not?
Sure. I think it's fine. I mean, after consulting with those organizations about their needs, we made immediate distributions of $25,000 to Jewish Family Service to re-grant and redistribute, and $10,000 to the Gemach to re-grant and redistribute. And we told them to come back to us when they needed more, and we will possibly pre-qualify other organizations to do that as well. We've given all organizations the opportunity who are working case management in order to be pre-qualified.
We've also asked them to report back to us anonymously, but so that we understand where the dollars go, to whom, by characteristic, and for what purpose. So that's a chance for us to learn more about what the needs are, which may shape future grants. These are fairly modest grants, but we want to make sure that the distribution process and the reporting and that it's all flowing nicely. And we fully expect that we'll be adding to that.
Great, thank you. The question was an interesting one because it's related to some other work being done in San Diego regarding our poverty study that was on the move, is to give people an understanding of how many poor Jews do we think we have in San Diego relative to those that will become impoverished as a result of COVID-19.
I guess I'll start with that. Darren, feel free to pipe up. Before COVID-19 started, there's been quite a national effort to understand poverty in the Jewish community. There's definitely a perception in some places that the Jewish community is white and wealthy, and it is not, or not exclusively. And so we had taken on an effort in partnership with Federation and JFS to really look at poverty in the San Diego Jewish community. And the study, if I remember correctly, before COVID-19, we were looking at something like 10 to 15% of the San Diego Jewish community living either below the poverty level, at the poverty level, and a few more really struggling to make ends meet. average household size in San Diego is 2. So it comes out to being something between, in the vicinity of 7,500 households. And that was before any of this happened. So, it's a significant number, and clearly this is going to push.
It's going to expand exponentially.
Exponentially.
If you can, Charlene, answer for us the following it's a 2-part question. I'll give them both at the same time. Is any of the money going to go to the organizations to support their overhead? And are some organizations looking to pay their staff a segment of their regular payroll, 50% or 75% of their salaries, as a way to offset some of their expenses?
So, overhead is a tricky word. It all depends on how you look at overhead. To some people, staff is overhead. To our process, staff was definitely not overhead. It's the core of how an organization delivers programs and services. So I guess the way you look at it, you could either say it's all going to overhead at this point or none, but not overhead, I think, in the way that it's traditionally meant. It's going for the most critical needs right now. And then to look at other 50% or 75%, as I mentioned, in the first 30 days, we just wanted organizations to avoid having to make crisis decisions about layoffs or furloughs, or even making dramatic pay cuts that might be shocking to their employees. So at this point, the loans are for the full payroll amounts. Depending on the circumstance, that may evolve.
Thank you. And I think the last question, and perhaps one that everybody's left with, is number one, can we share all of this with other people? Is any of the information shared on today's call considered confidential? And how can we as individuals reach out to the rest of the community to make sure that everybody participates?
Wow. Yes, you can share everything on this call. You can share the recording. You can encourage people to listen to it. You can talk to your friends about what we're up to. Certainly, if you know people who need help, we definitely want to know that. Or as Charlene said, any ideas that, to make sure that we are, many people are asking for help for the first time in their lives. It's not easy. And so help that way would be great. And encourage your friends that can to contribute. This is going to take all of us doing our part. There's just no question about it. Charlene, Darren, you want to?
Sorry, excuse me. I need to clarify a question that was from before regarding overhead. I think this is an important one. The question actually was meant for our 3 organizations. Is any of the money, any of the overhead, any of these funds going towards the overhead for our organizations?
No.
Absolutely not. No,
absolutely
on the contrary.
Not a penny. Not one penny.
It's such a privilege in a time where I think each of us feels such little control to be able to do something to assist. And we're so grateful to all of you for making it possible. So really thank you for that privilege.
Right, 100%, not a penny.
And in closing, Darren, I understand there's Federation Sunday message that you usually share. Do you want to share some of that? Add a call to Federation Sunday message? Or add this call to your message, maybe. Okay.
Maybe. But there is something I would like to say. When we started calling seniors, our focus was how are these seniors doing in isolation? But what we've learned over time from our volunteers, of which we have about 100, is that this is a way for those volunteers, like Charlene was saying, to have some sort of control. It's also just a really wonderful way to connect with community. And I would just say to everybody that's on the call, whether or not you're part of an organized effort to reach out to anybody, we're in a new normal. We need to do what our Jewish community does best and check in on people and see how they're doing. As you start hearing about challenges, anybody on the call today, shoot us an email about what you're hearing. We're only able to talk to so many people, and we'd love to hear what you're hearing from others as well.
And I just want to add one more thing about reporting transparency. At our first task force, we said transparency is going to be a hallmark of this fund. We've tried to be really transparent today, and there are going to be written updates that are shared as well and posted on our websites. And so this isn't going to be the only opportunity to learn more about the fund. We're very committed to that.
Calls. There'll be more calls like this.
Thank you. There's more to Thank you. That was the last of the questions. Thank you very much.
Great. Well, So thank you.
Thank you all very much, and please
Thank you, everybody.
CFSanDiego.org and make a donation.
Feel free to reach out to any of us too. We're at home. We're desperate to return your emails
And your
educate
calls.
you more.
We'd like to see you.
Thank you.
Hag Sameach.
Hag Sameach.